Welcome back to Light the Fuse. Charles, you are spinning me right round, baby. Right round like a record, baby. We just went from wick to fuse.
Yep. And brace yourself. Next week we'll be back to wick again.
Oh, my God.
You're going to get whiplash.
Wow, this is out of control, Charles. But we have a very cool guest who I was so excited to talk to and was really, really fun. Do you want to set up our big guest on this 2-part episode?
Yes, I do. Yeah, we got Mark Stoeckinger, who was a supervising sound editor on the John Wick movies, but also, of course, MI2 and MI3. And we get an inside look at the edit of MI2. He talks a little bit about what was going on behind the scenes there. So it's really cool. There's more that we'll talk about after this. After we hear the whole interview, there's stuff to discuss, but I don't want to spoil it yet. So we'll let him do the talking. But very excited to have him. He's a really great storyteller and has awesome stuff to say.
Now I got to do some talking, Charles, because I got to plug our sponsors. I want to let everybody know that this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon, and you should check out his podcast, My Favorite Album, which is really great. Charles and I were on it, and he talks to various people about the albums that kind of inspired them. And he's gone outside of the lines a little bit during quarantine, which is a lot of fun. The episode is also brought to you by John B., as well as Real Estate Interests LLC, commercial real estate advice for growing companies. And what they want to get across is that companies can consult with them even if they are not looking to buy or sell. They help companies save and strategize too. So check it out.
And Real Estate Interests LLC, we don't know yet. So if anybody out there knows, we need to get confirmation of whether or not this is a real company.
Yeah, it's totally up in the air. I mean, if we've been shilling some phony baloney company, we're going to be upset. But it is the very anonymous sounding place that an Ethan Hunt type figure would probably
I think it's real. I think it's real. And it's just, like we said before, like I think they do it's both, it's both real and a cover.
Okay.
When Ethan was installed as that security advisor guy in Spain and MI2,
yeah,
Ethan wasn't half-assing that job. I'm sure he did a really great job.
Yeah, it feels like he was embedded in the office culture. Everybody knew who he was. Yeah, I agree, Charles. I like where you're going, and I can't wait to find out. The last episode of the show, we will reveal whether Real Estate Interests LLC is real or not. So get ready for that. But in the meantime, here is Mark Stoeckinger, and here is Kevin Blumenfeld's legally actionable theme music. Let's start off talking about Mission Impossible because, we love talking about Mission Impossible.
I can tell.
We've devoted every waking moment of our free time to this pursuit. But how did you initially come on board Mission Impossible 2? Was it your relationship with Wu?
It was my relationship with Wu. And now you're going back 20 years now. So if things are a little hazy, please forgive me. Although sometimes I do think that we're in the era of chimera, right? A little bit of...
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Somebody is going to I've got the cure. Ooh, now we got the disease. Don't want to cross that line, but nonetheless, yeah.
Well, you were on Face Off, right?
I was on Face Off. That was the first time I worked with John.
And how was that experience?
It's fabulous. There's nothing like working with John Woo. I mean, every director is great and unique in their own way, and John is as well. He just has this visual style that begs for creative use of sound or imaginative use of sound or fun use of sound. I don't know. Find your favorite adjective, but that makes it a really interesting experience. He's really into it. I mean, John, with somewhat of his limited English, we'd get to a part and it's like, dialogue, boring part. Oh, action, fun, And we kind of felt the same way. He loves sound. He loves everything that the visceral experience of sound can create. I mean, he focused on the visceral experience. I know at one time, because he has a very lyrical visual style, and to me it's sort of fun to put in fun sounds for that. I remember one time early on, he goes, "Oh, you whoosh too much," the whoosh sound. I'm like, "But you're John Woo," and he's like,
There are a lot of great
He didn't ask to
wishes
take
in
it. He didn't ask to take it out. Or maybe he was just too. He wanted to take it out, but it was too polite. But I think ultimately it's part of what made that film endearing, and got an Academy Award nomination. So I can't complain.
Yeah. Was it always over the rainbow in that big shootout sequence?
Yes, it was always over the rainbow.
Okay.
That was Chris Wagner, the picture editor, was the one who was responsible for that.
Such a iconic moment.
Oh gosh, playing against type like that is just really great.
So he called you up, I'm assuming, and said, "I'm doing Mission Impossible." And
yes,
were you a fan of the show? Like, were you a fan of the first movie? Had you talked to anybody who'd worked on any of that stuff?
Well, I was definitely a fan of the first movie, but even more so, I was a kid when the TV show was on, so I was a fan of that always. So it's always nice to work on something that's iconic to your past.
Right.
And so really excited that he was going to do that. So I'm trying to think of what some of the more iconic experiences were. I mean, I had definitely seen the first Mission Impossible, and know how Tom is going, to be. It's going to be really action-packed. There's going to be technology, which is always fun. You got to create stuff from scratch, dream things up. And, it's going to be John Woo's visual style. So they're going to be doves, which got to have doves.
Well, and does John have... does he come to the table with ideas in terms of sound? Does he give you a lot of freedom? Or, how does that process work between the two of you?
He gives a lot of freedom. I'm not sure. His English is actually pretty good, but sometimes he doesn't always go there with his description. So he likes to react to something that's put together and presented so he understands what he's experiencing. And then he is definitely a fan of the big and the visceral and the dynamic. Some people can translate dynamic to loud, but that's not always the case. It can be frequency based, but or prominent. More importantly, I'd say certain sound beats he really prefers to be prominent, like in a fight scene or in a shootout or anything that's sort of action packed. One thing that's nice about Face Off is all that stuff was practical. The Learjet crashing into the hangar, that was practical. That wasn't a CG. So,
were you in Australia at all, or were you here the whole time?
I was here the whole time.
Okay.
I was here the whole time, and I'm trying to think of any other sort of nuances within that experience. That film went through, a fair amount of changes and structuring and things like that, because John Woo's style doesn't lead to a short film necessarily, and the studio had their wants and needs as far as film length, and so. And I think it took a while to find that happy medium. So because of that, there were a fair amount of changes along the way. But ultimately, it turned out great, and John was really happy with it.
Well, see, now you can clue us in, because we're obsessed with this idea of the longer John Woo cut of Mission Impossible 2, which you have probably seen.
Seen, yes. Remember, no. But I don't remember any of the beats or the nuances that were not in the theatrical version that might have found their way into an extended version.
Okay.
Well, from what we've heard, Stuart Baird came in and edited down the movie last minute, and
yes,
we've heard that there was the John. I don't know. The numbers have been thrown around. 3-hour long cut that John Woo had initially. I don't know if that sounds true.
Yeah, probably 2:45, 3 hours, somewhere in that range.
Wow.
And then we got a fair amount of picture editors to come in and try different things all simultaneously. So,
really,
Stuart being one of them. Yes.
And you don't remember any of this stuff, though?
Oh, I mean, I do. And the more you talk about it, the more of it becomes back.
Okay, let's put you. We'll put you in a trance. Yeah. Well, what do you remember? What's coming up?
What is coming up? Sometimes, it's interesting because we worked on a couple John Woo films like Face Off and Mission 2, and actually turned out to be Mission 3 to a certain extent. The picture editors were all in the same area. So sometimes, it's almost like a war veteran telling their story. That was in the Normandy. No, that was in the Battle of the Bulge. I forgot. Either way, it was bad. So... Not to say that that's exactly how my memory goes, but John, we would have meetings with everybody who was working on the film in one room at a time. And that could be everywhere, anyone from Hans, who composed it, to the visual effects people, and trying to find ways to spot through the movie and who was going to play what. I remember Hans Zimmer had a very interesting score, but he said, I'm going to do it sort of this in this lyrical way that's not going to have much in the way of transitions. So I'm really going to rely on anything you prefer to do in sound design to create those transitions. That's something that definitely sticks out. Because maybe that's the way he saw the pacing work. And, obviously you can make transitionary sounds without having it be all that integrated in the music. So it helps with pacing in that way.
We like those transitions. We love the flamenco dancer at the beginning and stuff like that. There's some really nice stuff in there. Yeah.
Yes, that's really neat. And this, the staccato of the heels and how that works with the music and what have you. It's its own beat and tempo. It's kind of dictated by how it's shot, but everybody reacts to it, reflects it in the work that they do.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember a particular sound effect that was difficult to achieve, or one that you remember being really proud of?
One thing that was a little bit kind of off is the motorcycle chase at the end. The motorcycle chase, the escape, which was really fun, but we're sort of new into digital. It's 2000, right? So there's something about the huevos of a motorcycle engine that just didn't really cut it in what was coming out digitally. So what we did is we looped the sound through a double recorder. So basically we re-recorded and put it back in the movie as we were mixing the movie. So we had so you get that tape saturation sound. So we were doing a very old school analog approach to something in digital to give it more of a weighted sound or something like that. So
wow.
But those are the little things that people who do this sort of work do and look to do to try something different, make something a little bit more interesting, try to achieve whatever effect it is that you're after.
Right.
So I remember that. I wish I could remember something specific about like the iconic sounds, like the injection of the Chimera or even the match itself. I do remember more on MI3 really spending some time to get the textural qualities of the match light, like you myopically go down to individual sounds, like just the scrape of the match on a striker. You don't even want it to light, you just want to get that scrape. And sometimes I'm trying to think if we used anything else other than an actual match, and probably did, because you might take like wood to wood scrapes and speed them up or do something like that so you can feel the texture of it. And then match strikes themselves can be little flares, and they can actually be match strikes, or you might want to slow them down so they have more low frequency. All the little nuances on a simple match strike that give it that iconic sound. So, that happened in both films to a certain degree. More readily in 3 than 2, but nonetheless, you've got that signature sound that's got to be fun, unique, and relate. So.
And 3 is really obsessed with that match. You see that head burning for.
Oh, it's like
right.
Yeah, it's like pornographic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just because it's an interesting visual that most people don't get to see something that close and see how it just kind of wraps around the head of the match and burns down the stick. And, there's individual sounds to articulate that. So you're like, I'd like to hear more of it when the sulfur kind of burns out, but it goes to the stick. And there might be some crackle for that, or there might be some kind of like jet, synthesized whoosh that is not obvious what it is, but it's part of the actual flame travel.
Right.
So, and then you can play with all those parts to really craft it to what you want it to be. So,
we talked to Gary Rydstrom a few months back, and he told us about the Sandstorm and Ghost Protocol, how they ended up using the sounds of people skiing to create the sound of a sandstorm. And we always love those kinds of stories where there's a weird sound that it was an unexpected sound used to elicit something from an audience. Did you have anything like that in any of the Mission films, or can you think of anything outside of Mission if there isn't one in one of those?
Well, I can think of things not so much in the Mission films because they're not quite as fresh with those nuances, but something like Prometheus, which I worked on. Some like when you say sand, that reminded me, the sandstorm in that movie was done with pistachio shells on a contact mic. So you get that kind of crackly sound. So it sounds like almost a little bit glass-like and a little bit dangerous.
That's
So those
interesting.
are all the particulates were something of that nature.
Yeah.
Certain films lend themselves to more of that sort of playful, non-literal use of sound than others. I don't remember any specifics in Mission that was sort of that was out of the ordinary. And I say that because as a sound creator for a film, you're always looking for something that's a little bit non-literal to support what you want it to do. The stereotypical obvious way is there's sometimes animal vocals, and an explosion or something.
Right.
That got made famous way back in Star Wars time. But
Actually,
that is a classic example of it.
we talked to Michael Camper. Do you know Michael Camper?
Yeah.
He worked on MI3, and we interviewed him a while back, and he told us about an animal sound. I think it was do you remember this, Drew? Was it a gorilla or a monkey or something?
Oh, for an explosion?
Yeah, it was an explosion on the bridge. He said he put in some kind of sound like that. I think it might have been a gorilla or something like that.
Yeah, a monkey scream is great sometimes.
Yeah.
Monkey scream, or elephant trumpet, lion roars are the more classically used, and a lot of times that goes in explosions or things that need to travel for a duration. Because that's how you think about it. It's like, I need something that's sort of big and powerful that travels for duration. I'm trying to think. In Mission 3, no, sorry, that wasn't Mission 3. But sometimes, in another movie, in Star Trek, used a powerboat accelerate for animal roars.
Oh.
Like an acceleration of like one of those big, well, they're not jets, but they got a big ass engine in the back of them, and
Yeah.
they open up like an envelope when you rub them, like an animal would. So little things like that. So that gave it a lot of power and energy. That's just an example. Sometimes it makes a better story than a sound. You never know. To tell people about it. Like, yeah, I did turn this thing upside down. Great. And you can never hear it and never know, and spend a lot of time and it was worthless. But yeah. Anyway.
Well, we care, and I think that's really important. So you worked with Wu a few more times after that, and was Paycheck his last American movie?
Paycheck was his last American movie.
Did you get the sense that he was done with this shit, or what?
Well, he moved back to working in Asia. I mean, I didn't work on his film Red Cliff, but I met up with him and did all I could to set up sort of the sound team that he would eventually work with in Asia.
That's cool.
That was important. I mean, I wasn't going to be able to work on it just because it was overseas, and it was just, there wasn't that avenue.
Right.
But yeah, Paycheck was the last one. Actually, one of John's first Chinese film, maybe his last American finished film, was something for UNICEF that was this short film shot in China, which is one of his best films ever. And I'm not sure if those films got out there. But yeah, so John, one thing, I mean, I can't speak for John, but I did notice that the studio system here, when you have a big budget, expensive movie, they're very involved. And that's not what he is used to when he made films in Hong Kong. So I would speculate that culture is different than his, and over a course of time, he didn't appreciate it
right
as much.
And so, like the post process in MI2 compared to Face Off, like when all those, you said there were multiple picture editors working simultaneously. Was he pulling his hair out at that point? I mean, was he sort of giving into this process, or was he fighting it? I mean, what was the situation there like?
Something he would pull his hair out in his own way of going outside and having a smoke. So that was probably his version of pulling his hair out.
The most polite way.
Yeah, the more polite, sort of non-confrontational way. He liked to see what the different editors would present for his scene. It's not like he had multiple editors cutting the same scene. Because although some filmmakers do that really wasn't that efficient for him at the time. So he would sort of divvy it up so editors could spend more time with it and make things better. So that was more of his approach. I never really thought of John as a micromanager. I never experienced that, and I never witnessed that, although there could be areas where he was, and I just don't know. But and actually that helps when directors are not micromanagers, because then they've got all these ideas to choose from.
Right.
If somebody always wants a certain shade of blue, you're going to give them that. You might not ever present a green or a yellow, and they might go, yeah, not the yellow, but yeah, that green's actually a good idea. That works for my film. So
Right.
he was wise enough, I think, to approach things that way.
Do you think he was happy with the movie, the way it turned out?
Yes. Yeah.
Really? Okay, cool.
He's always really proud of him. Always really proud, because he is such the master, and everybody always defers to him. So even if he's not in anybody's face about something, he's always deferred to, and it's always his decision. So it's always his movie.
Right.
Unless you have, studio involvement, like I said, on something where the schedule's tight, or there's a length that sort of maybe a disagreement on what that length should be. It's about the only time that I noticed that others would kind of get in his way. So.
Okay, because it sounded like maybe he was not fully happy with the process on Mission Impossible 2, but you're saying that he actually was okay with it.
As best I could tell. I mean, I can only speak to my world.
Yeah.
And I do have somewhat of an insular world a little bit. So much of the sound creation is done independently, and it's until you get to that point where you bring it all together and make a mix out of it that you have that level of interaction. Unless you're going to make things, obviously, along the way, which you do, but it's usually not as global until you actually go to the mix.
Right.
With him. Others different, but with him, that's the way it works.
Well, you got called back for Mission Impossible 3, obviously. Was that was Tom super happy with your work, or how did you sort of get that call back? Do you know?
It's a good question. I don't exactly know how I got that call back. Maybe it was assumed because I did 2 that I should be doing 3. It was Paramount.
Although
there.
They switch production heads so often on the movies, which is
right.
Right.
Well, I did have that history, even though with 3 it's completely different with JJ and different editors and everybody else. But since Tom is so involved, I definitely have a relationship with Tom on that level. So.
I mean, we love Tom Cruise stories. Do you have any fun ones?
Do I have any fun ones? I love the way he runs.
Don't we all?
Love doing Foley for the way he runs. I don't know. My biggest Tom Cruise story is his contagious enthusiasm. He's actually quite the leader, and because he's always the producers on the films that I've been involved with of his, for the most part, maybe not Last Samurai as much, but he always inspires and pushes, when necessary, people to do their best work. Because he has such an incredible work ethic, he expects others to, match that. And I think it's great. And he's always got good ideas. He's always very appreciative. He's always very kind. Here could be a story. I mean, it doesn't even involve the film, but early on, Mission 2, he came by the mix to review something. My family was visiting. My youngest son at the time was probably 6 or 7 and a big fan of cars. And Tom drove up in some Saline Mustang. And Tom sat and talked with him about cars for 7-10 minutes.
Wow.
And that explains a lot about Tom. He's a really good guy. He's a really good guy, and he really cares.
That's
and
awesome.
I haven't even counted, but I've worked on my fair share of Tom Cruise movies.
Yeah. Was there a different sort of aesthetic approach to the sounds in the third one? I mean, obviously it's a much more grounded movie in some ways. It's not as heightened as Woo's movie. Was there talk of what that approach was?
Well, it was a little bit different because JJ now, he is more vocal on what he likes, and he is very technically savvy and creatively innovative in ways that are specific and unique to JJ. And so he would have more to say about certain things and how things were developed, such as, the sound of the match. If it was going to be detailed in the close-up, he was really excited about developing sounds that really heighten that. Well, here's a little sound thing that involves Tom Cruise. He's climbing the mountain, climbing the stone at... This is going to be really embarrassing. This is 3.
No,
that's 2. That's 2.
Yeah.
2. So... he was really specific on what hands on rock sounded like. So he's like, no, Mark, how about when it does it, it's kind of more of a slap, but it's got a little bit more of a body to it, and there's a little bit of this grit kind of grab thing to it. And so, hey, so you got input from Tom on what it was like for him, because he's actually done it. Okay, that's 2. But on 3, JJ was really excited about what the visceral aspects of sound might add to it, from the plane when they open it up and all the straps are beating around and flying. That should just be kind of like really loud and in your face, just like it would be in real life. So JJ was definitely about height and reality, and he was definitely about accentuating detail, and he would talk to those ends. John never talked about that sort of thing. So, JJ would show up to the cutting room with DVDs of various, I don't know the picture side all that well, but like if you're going to go into Photoshop and you're going to do a visual effect and you want a certain texture or grain or something that you're going to copy paste and manipulate, he would have also like a library of that, because he would definitely be involved in doing something like that as an example of JJ's involvement, for sure.
Charles, you want to ask about any specific sounds in 3? Because I got a couple.
No, you go ahead first.
Yeah.
I'll let you go.
Okay. When the explosive charge goes off in Kerry Russell's head, do you remember that? It's sort of a metallic twinge or something.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Yeah.
Well, it had a real electrical element to it. It had like an electrical crackle to it, So it had a little bit of like that camera element. So that was the motivation for the sound. Because some of the specifics of that I don't remember, but they're probably from that family, of sound. But if you make something electrical, if you find something that's painful to somebody in its pure sense, you can integrate it into something sonically and create that same visceral response. At least I believe so.
Right.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it because we do it.
What about the drone? Because it kind of has this great kind of, it has a personality.
Right. Yeah, I know. I can't speak to the drone. I don't really remember what the specifics were.
Mark.
I know. Yeah.
We should have put you in a trance before this episode. So
you needed one of those like hypnosis sessions.
Yes.
Where you like, okay, the drone, oh god, the drone. And then sometimes I might have like erased that sector of my brain.
I know we need more Patreon contributors before we can pay for the hypnosis sessions, but we'll put that in the budget for next year.
Now, if you want to get into Wick, I can go for...
Looking at the clock, I think we could get into Wick. Charles, do you have any other questions about 3?
But yeah, please do. See what I can
remember
answer.
In either mission, there are a lot of gadgets. Do you remember any kind of like, I know like there's that great gadget in 3 when they're at the Vatican and they shoot that little antenna at the sewer.
A lot of times we would go in and... here's something that's somewhat of a story. So in getting like gadgets and servos and things like that, a lot of times we turn to toys because inherently there's a lot of that, right? So I remember going into the local Toys R Us when there was such a thing and asking if we could come in after hours and just record whatever we could find. And they're like, no. So ultimately did that stealth-wise and go in and record like big wheels kind of turning even though they weren't on, and finding little toys to record until you got kicked out. Then you go to another store. So that's definitely something, as far as I can't speak to that specific gadget, but the concept of finding unique and sort of, different sounds are come from whatever you could source real world. And that was, to me, it was a unique source. That's the fun thing about films too, is no matter what their budgets are, it seems like there's never much of a budget for recording sounds, and most of it we all do on our own, and a lot of it ends up being very stealthy. There's still grown men or women going to places they probably shouldn't be to record something that they want or need. That's the best part.
You're just living.
There's a lot of times when people tell stories about crashing cars, being almost arrested, potentially even getting hurt, recording something they sure shouldn't have been recording, as far as oops. It's almost like Travolta in
Blowout.
Blowout, yeah, exactly. So that happens all the time. That definitely happens all the time. Yeah, so stealthy recordings inside Toys R Us, as far as various like servo motors or gadgets or things that fire or shoot or retract or spring loaded and on Mission 3 also the Vatican recording happened that way. Although I didn't do it, through Soundboard we found somebody who was German, lived in Germany, but had connections to the Vatican, and went in with stealth recordings and recorded the Vatican in 72 gigs worth of detail.
Wow.
And had all the stuff in the Vatican before I think he eventually got kicked out. So anyway.
So that's just like Vatican room tone? essentially.
Well, yeah, but or voices or things that happen, or like maybe just the courtyard. Just they were basically ambiances,
Yeah.
but they were in spaces that they might have shot in or recreated. I think they shot in some and recreated others in sets, but
Yeah.
that you're not going to necessarily get. Unfortunately, while they're shooting the movie too, you rarely have ever had the opportunity to go like, okay, that's great. They shot that. I'm there. Now let's go record the sound of that.
Right.
There's no time to stop down. Everybody's always moving on. So.
Well, before we move on to John Wick, I think Charles and I both wanted to ask you about Darkman because there was a recent.
Well, you guys are going way too back.
I know we're going way too far back, and we don't have the budget for the hypnosis yet. But there was a recent sort of oral history that talked about how fucked up the post-production process was on that movie.
It's a big anniversary, 30th anniversary.
You got to understand, though, the more fucked up it is, the less I remember. Because sometimes, it's like women in childbirth. You're like, okay, I forgot that.
Do you remember it being a particularly fraught kind of post-process?
I just remember what I call the 52-card pickup version of a post schedule on that. That there was always sort of changes in just basically what the picture cut was, and therefore what the sound needed to be. I don't remember clearly what, actually I don't remember at all, what sort of the creative sound directive was or how that might have changed or flip-flopped and turned on its head at times. That part I don't remember. I'm kind of peripheral to Darkman, so I can't say that I was not the sound supervisor, so I wasn't in direct communication with the filmmakers. But, at my end, I just saw all the various sort of changes in picture cut and ideas. That's what I remember the most clearly from that film.
Did you get to work with Bruce Campbell? Because there's in this article it said Bruce Campbell came in and recorded a bunch of voices to fill in the background sounds and stuff.
I have no doubt. I did not get to work. I did meet Bruce Campbell, but I didn't, work with him on that level. No.
Yeah.
A guy named Terry Rodman was the supervising sound editor, so he would have been the one spending all that time.
Right.
See, there's a name. I remember that.
Yeah, you did. So we could spend another 4 hours talking to you about things that you don't remember, including working with Tony Scott and doing Iron Man 3.
I remember all that. I remember.
Okay, you remember that. Okay.
Yeah, if you get to about like 2008 or 9, I think, it's the law of diminishing returns is before that, and it gets better over the course of the last 10 to 15 years.
You've worked with both Scott brothers. Do you have a favorite?
No.
Okay. I was really
That would have been bad if I would have answered yes. Well, no, because I don't, and I always found them very uniquely different.
Yeah.
Both
geniuses.
They are both geniuses. They are both very focused, and they like to work fast. So they can come up with an idea and either live with it or modify it.
Yeah. Tarantino was on a podcast recently talking about Unstoppable and how great the sound is.
Oh, really? That's nice.
That's a really amazing movie that just commend you for. I don't even have a question. Sorry.
Oh, thanks. We can talk about Unstoppable if you want.
Sometimes Charles just likes to give that praise, and sometimes people need it.
Yeah, that works. Actually, Unstoppable was very fun.
What was Tony like? How about that? That's a question. How was Tony?
What was Tony? He's ultimately like a guy's guy. He is, if you want to say, the more blue-collar stereotype between the two as far as relating to you on that level. He'd have funny names for sounds, but he was very, very structured on how he liked things to be, from where he'd want people to sit. As a matter of fact, while you're mixing the film, you couldn't leave, like if you had to go to the bathroom. So when he had to go, it was like one of those, when they skydivers go off a plane, they're all together and everybody runs after the first guy. So everybody's running out to like take their break at the head while he's taking his, So, and he was always very nice about it, but it was just him, He was real specific on Unstoppable, what he wanted for sound. He liked, the clickety-clack sound of trains. And quite honestly, most rails now are welded, and so they don't necessarily do that. But you want to venture into an Unstoppable conversation, or are we off topic too much? Because there's a lot to talk about in that movie.
Topic. I know, the train itself, right, is like a character.
The train's a character. That was the fun and unique aspect of that film. But there was a lot of sound recording on that movie. Okay, well, we went there, so we're going to go there for a little bit. So There's a lot of sound recording in that movie, and I came upon a guy, Ken Johnson, who is not only an amazing sound recordist, but a huge train aficionado. So it was a match made in heaven for him and me and the film. And he chased trains all over the southwest of the country. And he knew where there might be long sections of what they call bolted track that give that clickety-clack sound. Or he knew where there were crazy train crossings where trains make, the unique wheel sounds that are going to be the stereotype of the movie. We rented train cars to put people on. We went out to those that might have had private trains to record. We put people on trips that had that kind of rail and just acquired a lot of great recordings. But at the end of the day, Tony appreciated all that, but he was very specific to stereotypical, iconic signature sounds, which every director really is. And so he sat with me for 2 days straight and listened to everything that I had and recorded, and he'd come up with all these funny names for stuff. Like, that's the big nose Bobo, or, I'm just making that up, and that wasn't one of the names. Most of them are probably not repeatable on a podcast. But, and so in the mix, if he had an idea that he wanted something, hey, give me the big nose Bobo for that shot where the train does the thing. It's like, okay, great. So we dutifully put that in, So that was him. And I can't think if I've ever, and I probably have not ever had a director sit with me and get that specific, at least on a film of that scale. I've worked on a lot of independent films where it's really fun to sit with a filmmaker and just build the soundtrack as you go. But on films like that, where they're so busy and pulled in many directions, to have a director sit with you and come up with their favorite palette and get real specific about what they want where, that's pretty rare. Ridley he didn't do that, but the end result is that he was a great clearinghouse for people's input. And he really appreciated innovation. Not that Tony didn't as well. Tony was more controlling than Ridley, in my experience. But they're both very, very specific in what they want. Either they could ask for it, maybe more specifically in the case of Tony, or they could react to it and then fine-tune what was happening, say in the case of Ridley. My joke is that at about 7, 8 o'clock at night, Tony would be thinking about where to order dinner, and Ridley would be thinking who's going to make the martinis. But, in other words, Tony he was a night owl. He liked to work all the time. He would come in dutifully in the morning, and, the doctor wouldn't let him smoke cigars anymore, but he would still clip one and put the clipping on the console and have, chew on one pretty much all day. And I remember Ridley would come in on Prometheus, and if he wanted something a certain way, he would just draw out a sketch for visual. When the visuals, visual effects people would come by, and he was trying to express an idea, he would do that. As a matter of fact, he left a doodle book at the back of the stage after the mix, and God, I wish I had that. Somebody has it, and it's just filled with just amazing drawings because he's such an artist,
Wow.
You're a great sound guy, Mark, but you're a terrible thief, is what I'm listening to.
Yeah,
right now.
exactly. Yeah. Right, I know. Honesty will get you nowhere. Yeah.
Well, the longer cut has been seen, Charles.
Yep.
It exists. # release the Woo cut.
I mean, we got confirmation of Stuart Baird, which I guess wasn't really that much of a question mark, but just the talk of all these different editors working on it and the longer Woo cut. And it was interesting to hear that Woo was seemingly happy with the final product, at least from what Mark saw.
Yeah, he was probably just happy that it was finished and going into theaters, is my guess. It's over. It's done.
He also mentioned that short film that was part of an anthology movie, which I had never heard of. This anthology movie was called All the Invisible Children, and it was made for UNICEF. And
you found it.
Yes, did you watch it? I watched it.
No, you were very upset by it. So
It was very upsetting. I have a daughter. I have another daughter on the way, and it's about a young girl. It's very upsetting. A couple different young girls, actually. It's but it's worth watching, especially if you're a John Woo fan. And the movie also featured segments directed by Ridley Scott and Spike Lee, which is pretty cool. But we found Woo's segment. It's about 18 minutes long. We'll post it in our episode guide. So if you go to LightTheFuse-podcast.com and go to the episode guide, go to this episode, you will find it there. As long as it's still up on YouTube, it will be there. And it's worth checking out if you're a John Woo fan. It's pretty sentimental, which I think John Woo is a sentimentalist in a lot of ways. I think.
Yeah.
And it's not really an action thing at all. It's really just this character story, and it's very upsetting and sad.
Well, we also found out that we have something in common with Mark, which is that we also have been kicked out of Toys R Us's.
That's true.
We
did used to get kicked out of Toys R Us in high school. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. We would try to shoot a little snippet of a movie here and there. And
Yes.
Yeah.
But we've never been kicked out of the Vatican.
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. And I loved hearing about Tony, the difference between working with Tony and Ridley, which was really exciting.
It's always great to hear Tony Scott stories. We of course love him so much and
miss him. Yeah.
And next week you got to come back because we talk about Jack Reacher, we talk about Heat, and of course we talk about John Wick. So there's a lot of really great stuff to hear next week.
Yes.
You need to come back.
Yes. And we also want to encourage you to sign up for our Patreon. We have a bunch of different tiers, and each one gets you unique stuff. And also, it's just a fun place to hang out. And we have commentary tracks, bonus episodes every week, a monthly Skype call, just a lot of fun stuff. Charles, wouldn't you agree?
I do agree.
Yeah. And if you can't do that, maybe you want a t-shirt. We've got a bunch of great new designs on our TeePublic store. So go over there. You can get the designs on literally anything from a water bottle to a t-shirt and anything in between.
And there's not really a great link to our TeePublic page. It's very easy to find. So go to our website, LightTheFusePodcast.com, go to the merch section, and then in there you will find the link. And you'll also see some options there on our website that shows you what you can get from that store.
And if you can't do any of that, which we totally understand, just be sure to like, subscribe, rate, and review. And just tell people talk about this podcast, please. Get someone who knows someone to give us a shout out, and it'll make it all the difference. And speaking of shout outs, do we have any shout outs to give?
Yes, we do have to give a special thank you to Jacob Ballard. Jacob's been a big help to us for a long time now, and he's an awesome part of our Skype chats as well that we do every month with our upper tier Patreon members. So thank you so much to Jacob, and also thank you to our intern Abby Smith and to our mixer and editor Luke Burson. So I think that's about it for this week.
All right, we'll be back next week with part 2.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. Before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at LightTheFusePodcast@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.